Well, hello my fellow car modelers, how you doing today? We've got a great episode of Luka's Kits for you today, and we're going to be getting back in the Wayback Machine to 1989. If some of you guys weren't in the hobby at that time, I'm going to share a little something that I found quite interesting back then, which was in my earlier years of car modeling and when Pro Street was at its height in the hobby and in the real car world. Something kind of weird and interesting came out that I kind of went, Now these are a couple of kits that we're going to do a little comparison of, but what I have here are the actual original versions of these two kits. They've come out several times. I'm sure many of you recognize them, but you might not recognize the box art. But these are the original editions of these two kits. They're from two different manufacturers, yet they came out relatively around the same time, like within months from each other, and they were almost the exact same subject. But it's really interesting how each one of those companies did the execution. Both are terrific kits. I like them both. That's why I have multitudes of both of them. And these kits were purchased brand new by me back then. The Revell is one that came out in 1989, and the AMT came out in 1990. But we're talking they were a matter of months apart. They both got announced at the same time, and I remember back then a whole bunch of my model car buddies and we were like, why are they both doing the same thing? At the time there were no 67 Chevelles available, and also oddly enough, and I'm not covering them in this, I'm just sticking with the two Pro Streets, was that they also both came out with their own stock versions of these kits. But we're going to just look at the Pro Street versions because that was a heavily used kit, heavily used for parts, and they both have their weaknesses and they both have their triumphs. There were always guys that were in the Revell camp, and there were guys that were in the AMT camp when we were all doing our Pro Street cars. And of course it's a typical chassis that can go into so many GM cars, and I used it several times for other projects with different bodies on them, that it just was a very popular kit to buy, and we all got multiples. And I've had people ask, and they would see them in the background of these particular kits and ask why I had so many of them. Well, because I would rate them. As a matter of fact, my kits were so heavily rated, I had a really hard time coming up with two complete kits and had to kind of make them complete. So hopefully we have everything so I can show you everything. But let's dig into these kits and take a look at them one by one. And we are going to start out with the Revell one. So we'll start out with the instructions here, and it's pretty basic, old school Revell instructions. Talks about the Pro Street mean looking street machines loaded with performance reflected by the supercharged world of professional drag racing are setting the pace. Back in the 80s. They were setting the pace back in the 80s. But anyways, it's pretty typical of the day Revell instructions. Pretty good instructions. Got a lot of cool stuff. Revell was really starting to pick up on their engines. They were getting really good with the big box Chevy. This was one of the first ones that really had the great detail, nice looking heads, and even a separate fuel pump. But you'd think a car like this would have an electric fuel pump. That's pretty much it. Nice detailed suspension. There was a lot of cool things about this kit, the Revell kit, that made it pretty much the stellar of the two because of the detail and the extra little parts that we're going to look at. But then, the other one had its value, but we'll move on to that. We're going to do comparisons later too, but we'll start with this chassis, which was really cool. This was kind of like the first of Revell's Pro Street type chassis. I can't think off the top of my head what other ones they ever did, but the first Pro Street kit that came out in the 80s that blew everybody's mind, that had similar tubs with the bead roll in them, which is really cool, was the AMT Nova. So it was kind of cool that this came out with a really nice back half. Looked pretty accurate to a typical fabricated back half. Doesn't really specify any typical manufacturer. It's just a really good looking back half with the stock floor pan, pretty accurate for Chevelles, and the frame, really nice frame. So it was pretty good looking. And then we have a nice interior tub with no back seat, and you got the tubs kind of looks like they're carpeted, and there's like like this would have a stereo system, but it's kind of a nice interior tub piece with separate door panels. We'll show those here in a second. And then a pretty good, accurate 67 Chevelle body here. There was one thing that I hated about the Pro Street kit when it came to the body. Well, actually two things. I don't know what was going on with this hood. I personally am one that hates stuff sticking out of hoods. This would have been a pretty cool cowl hood. It's not really like a 69 Camaro type ZL2 hood. I hated that it already had a hole in it. You didn't have the option of cutting that hole out. In my opinion, I did not like that hood, that there was already a hole in it. It kind of wrecked it as far as I was concerned. But as long as we're looking at this tree, you can see one of the two side exit exhausts. And along with the hood, this was the big fail for the body look, I think. It was this rear bumper and tail light. They wanted to go with a custom tail light, and they didn't give you the option to have the stock rear bumper and tail light area, tail light panel. Now there was a way to fix this. Is Revell did put out a street stock version of this kit, and you could buy that whole kit just to get the tail piece for it. There's your door panels, are kind of custom, but you see how it came with the separate door panels. Look at that, a separate dashboard cover. There's that fine big block Chevy. The heads were just really nice. Really good looking big block heads. Separate upper control arms. Very neat kit in a lot of ways. The chassis was extremely detailed. You saw that dash pad, so you know, here's the dashboard. It was all separate, and it's got a little tack added to it right there. The rear suspension. The rear suspension is so cool on this kit. You have, you know, a total really nice kind of simplified 4-link suspension with the wheelie bars. You could cut those wheelie bars if you want. It has some nice coilovers that would go on there. A Ford 9-inch rear end with your third member. So this upper third link, that's chrome. It really added a nice touch to the rear end. Really was a very detailed, very nice kit. What a great kit to get a hold of, to even use for pirating parts and for putting into other bodies. You could do so many different Pro Streets, GTO Pro Street. You could do a Oldsmobile. It just, this chassis fit and everything. But it would take some work, and along with the really neat detail that it had, it came with some difficulty. It was a bit tricky to get all together and everything. So that's where we're now going to show you the AMT and the differences in there. And now we're going to start with the AMT, and we're starting again with the instructions. And pretty basic AMT instructions, like they were from the day, explanation of the 67 Chevelle. And nowadays, the 67 Chevelle is prime material for Pro Street rebop. Okay, it was the 80s, what can I say? We never really discussed it. I didn't show you how the roll cages were. This kit had a pretty decent roll cage. The Revell one didn't have a full roll cage. It just had the main hoop and just down bars. It didn't have a full roll cage, where this kit did. You can already see from the instructions that this was a little bit simpler kit. And this kit also had a very, very good representation of a 67 Chevelle. Now we'll go into the chassis. A little bit simpler, doesn't have the bead roll. It's not as accurate looking. You can see how much more simplified it is. Even the stock frame section, pretty good floor pan. What I do like about the AMT better is that you don't have a tub, you have the floor pan right here, the carpet and everything. So, you know, your floor pan is a little more complete. But you know, the frame's very basic looking. It looks somewhat like a GM full frame, but it's very simplified, not quite accurate, a little bit too narrow and thin. Still a pretty nice looking go-to chassis for a transplant into another body. Firewall, very basic, not much to it. The rear end, you can see that it's in halves. It was basically a representation of a Chevy, just a narrowed Chevy, probably 12 volt. There's a kind of neat brackets right there for the coilover. There's the other end of the rear end, the top portion, and you see those two pegs for alignment. There's basically your upper control arms that look like stock Chevelle upper control arms, and it just fits right into it like that and gives you your ride height immediately. So this is a much more simpler kit. And of course it looks a little simpler when you have it all together, but it still looks pretty good. Onto the engine. Pretty decent big block Chevy. Pretty decent looking heads. Not as much detail as the Revell kit. And you got upper and lower control arms that are separate, but they're just not as real looking as the Revell. You could make it posable steering, it's designed, but the problem with posable steering I always find is it makes things look out of scale and a bit clunky to make everything work correctly. And there's your transmission mount. It's got a regular standard Chevelle SS hood. No weirdness on it, so if you want it to stay pretty stock looking, and you have the option of cutting it open. On the chrome tree here, we have ourselves our just stock rear tail panel. Right there you can see one of the taillights right there. That fit nicely into. Here's some hideous, ugly wheels that I never, ever use. And there's your simplified, I don't know, I guess you got a stock 4-link kind of, I don't know what's going on. It's just a bar. And you have your links for your kind of okay looking wheelie bars. You can see it just doesn't have the detail that the Revell kit has. It's got kind of a cool bracket onto your alternator, shifter, you know, lower rocker chrome there. But here's some nice stock Chevy big block valve covers right there. You have kind of a custom interior, looks like sheet metal with bead roll interior. Kind of has a cool back seat block out that you stick in there. Little holes there for the roll cage down bars to go into, and it's got this cool, looks like it's bead roll Chevrolet emblem. That was a hot thing back in the 80s with Pro Streets. Just a stock looking steering wheel and dashboard. And that's pretty much a quick rundown of this kit. Let's do a little bit of comparison between the two on a few things. Okay, comparison. Bodies first. When you look at them up close, I'm just going to let you guys make a decision on what you think. And just some things. Any of you who have owned these Chevelles, I've had a couple. To me, the AMT actually looks like the better looking Chevelle as a build-up. I don't know. I've built both of them as, you know, Chevelle super stock cars and stuff, and I really like when they're done. I really like the looks of the AMT over the Revell. The Revell, just, I don't know, the roof looks too big comparison to the body. This was just a nicer looking Chevelle. It's hard to tell without built up, but you know, I'm just trying to give you guys a little bit of comparisons. This is one thing I liked about the Revell, is the Revell had the inner fender wells that were a little more realistic looking. Again, there was things that Revell would do that looked a little more real world, where the AMT has a lot of simplifications, yet the AMT just built into a better looking car in the end, you know, as far as body proportions and what it would look like. Like when I wanted to do a 67 Chevelle, I go with the AMT. And now we're going to take a look at the chassis, and pretty much right off the bat, well, what do you guys think? Yeah, the Revell chassis is way nicer. So this definitely wins in looks, but again, it makes it complicated. This wins in simplicity, and when it's together it doesn't look too bad, and sometimes this is the better choice lots of times for a transplant or just building out of the box. If I wanted to build out of the box a 67 Chevelle that's tubbed as a super stock car, I went with the AMT. I just overall, when it was completed, no, it didn't have the detail, but it was simpler, but still gave the right looks and just had a better stance, a better look sitting there. Okay, I was kind of saving this for last. There's a lot of other things we could do comparisons, but we were looking at the major stuff. And the way I'm looking at this review is more, not so much doing a 67 Chevelle. It's like, of the two kits, it gives you an idea of what you want in transplanting into something else. And here's something that was always a big plus to one over the other, were these tires. Tires are always a big deal with Pro Street. And here we have the Revell, and here we have the AMT. Now, back when these kits first came out, Revell had in their arsenal from another kit they did, it was the Rick Dobbertin J2000 Pontiac. They had done these Firestone treaded tires that for the longest time, if you wanted to do a Pro Street, you either had to raid the big tire, and there was only one, so you'd have to take two kits of the monogram sprint cars and raid the big tire out of them. That was an option, but then they came out with this. And people would get that J2000, and then this kit came out with this really neat Firestone with really neat tread. Front tire was a Moroso Front Runner, not too bad. I always felt it was just kind of a little bit too narrow. And this was something that was off that Rick Dobbertin Pontiac. You can see it says Moroso. It was pretty easy to paint if you wanted to, or just leave that way. It was a good looking tire combination. Then we go into the AMT. AMT had these drag slicks since the early 70s when they were doing their great Pro Stock kits that were just ahead of their time. When those came out, those were like the first tub cars to come out. It's just you could get those Pro Stock kits. That was actually from MPC. When AMT acquired MPC, they had these tires available to them. So it's just a really nice, cool, one of my favorite slicks. I love these slicks. I got tons of them. I've used them. They're really cool. But it was a Pro Street, so that was a big fail because it's a slick. Now it worked out for me because most of the time I like to build race cars with these, not Pro Streets. The front tire, I don't know what the heck this came from. It just looks like some little narrow street tire. Not even that good. It's got decent tread, but it's just whatever they had laying around. Later on, they would take this tire in later kits, and then they treaded it and took the lettering off. Same exact tire. And this is what we were covering with the Malibu flip nose build. And we were going to go with this tire. But it kind of represents a 70s type of, just treaded, wide, bias ply tire from any one of the companies that were popular in the 70s. And that's what they did, is they redid them. But this kit, original version, I think later on they came out with this. This is what came out into this kit. And also this was in the 66 Nova Pro Street. That is your comparison in the tire department. To wrap this all up, there is weaknesses and pros to both these kits. That's why I have both of them. I love them both. They both have their uses. And I enjoy both of them very much. I will never say I like one over the other. I like things about this one that I don't like about that, and vice versa. But they're two great kits on two little different ends of the spectrum. Two different levels of building here. Two different results of how far in detail you want to go. What's acceptable in less detail. Not quite as accurate, but you enjoy the build of it. Or this one gets really complicated, but the level of accuracy is amazing on this one. I would build this if I was building a 67 tubbed Chevelle. This one, I buy these up for strictly parts. Great parts kit. Great full-on build kit. That is pretty much my last input of what I feel about these kits. It's great to do another Luka's kits. Hope you learned a little bit of something, and now you can go to the swap meets and hunt for these kits, because I don't believe either one of them are in production anymore, but they were done in so many different versions over the years. They would be reissued, that there's plenty of them out there. Go to the swap meets, find them. So I hope you learned something and enjoyed this video. Please like if you did. Subscribe. Channel's growing even faster and bigger now. We're doing really well. Check out my Teespring for all your shirts and mugs and stuff. We have a Patreon account. All the links are in the description below. Check out the rest of the videos if you haven't. It's great to be back with Luka's kits. It's been a long time. We got tons of kits more to show you. So keep on building those models. Have fun with it. Keep on buying kits and loading up your collection. Don't worry about what anybody says. You hoard those kits because it's fun. It's all a part of the hobby.